So, Charan, I know you are very happily married.
Yeah, if I say so myself, give or take 16 years.
16 years, wow. So do you think you're ready to fall in love again?
What, with my wife or someone else maybe?
Not someone, maybe something else, nature.
Oh, thank God. You had me worried there for a moment. Nature, I suppose I can handle.
Well, you're going to be very popular with our next guest.
As I usually am.
Belina Lee is the CEO of Mandai X, and she's on a mission to use innovation to help people fall in love with nature and wildlife at scale.
Great. So today, we're chatting with Belina about how she's working with a team to make the world a better place. Let's do this.
Let's do it. Hello and welcome to today's episode of the TransformAsians podcast, and a big warm welcome to Belina.
Thank you, Richard. Thanks for having me.
It's great that you're here. There's a lot to talk about today, but let's start maybe with your career and your journey. It's been a fascinating, changing journey. Maybe you could start by telling us a little bit about that.
Absolutely. So I graduated with an economics and philosophy degree. Started my career with Singapore Airlines, data analyst and performance analyst, building their first data warehouse.
Wow.
And, did a couple of marketing jobs, moved to American Express, went into fintech with MasterCard, and landed at Mandai Wildlife Reserve, doing our part to protect nature for future generations to come.
So a very, very big journey and a lot of change in that journey.
Yes.
That's fascinating. But what's inspired you to move from a traditional economics role to something closer to conservation?
Yeah. So my original trigger for moving was really to give back to the country and do something for Singapore, right? And Mandai Wildlife Reserve Rejuvenation is a national iconic project, once in a lifetime. And Mandai is a special place, right, for many, many generations of Singaporeans and local residents. And so I originally joined from a social standpoint, but as I'm an animal lover as well. So as I, grew in Mandai, the love for wildlife and the nature was just, almost a natural development in terms of, what I spend a lot of time thinking about. And one may think that, economics is very hard, it's very financial, it's all about commercial outcomes.
Yes.
And conservation is all about nature, wildlife, the planet. And the two seem to be at opposite ends, very polarized.
Yes.
Right? And I feel that my role in terms of finding that sweet spot between the two, right? Infusing both economic growth or, growth for Singapore, growth for the organization, together with beneficial outcomes for wildlife and nature can coexist, right? And not enough organizations are spending time thinking through such difficult topics. And that's where, I spend the bulk of, myself and my team, spend a lot of time innovating, right, so that we can achieve dual outcomes for Singapore as well as for the world.
Fantastic. Mandai as a place and as a organization, it has an incredible history, doesn't it, in Singapore and I think in Southeast Asia. Do you think could you talk a little bit about that and why this area of conservation and sustainability is so important for Mandai?
So Mandai's roots are very much in social sustainability, right, as well as environmental sustainability. The Singapore Zoo was started 50 years ago in 1973 with the notion of bringing Singaporeans and local residents closer to wildlife, right? Back then, there were not many places where families could hang out, unlike today, right?
Yes.
Plentiful, and Parks has done a fantastic job. So back then, there was only the Singapore Zoo, maybe the Botanic Gardens, a handful of places. So the roots of Mandai has always been, how do we make Singapore a better place for families, right, as well as all local residents in Singapore. It has also been a window to the wild, right, especially for Singapore being such an urban city.
Yes.
very few people have the opportunity to interact with wildlife.
Yes.
And so, therefore, with the Mandai Wildlife Parks, of course, with Singapore Zoo being one of our flagship parks, we are then able to bring people closer to wildlife, and from there, hopefully spark their love for wildlife, and that they will do their part to protect nature.
Is it something that you think takes generations to change? You know what I mean?
Yeah, so this is a really interesting question, right? We have found that it is very easy or much easier to spark that sense of love and wonder amongst the younger generation. So, you know, for those of us who have kids, when they're 10 and below, trip to the zoo, fantastic, what a treat, right? Love the animals. And then we call it the magical age of 12. Once they graduate from primary school, they start entering secondary school, suddenly it's uncool, right? Like, hey, it's no longer cool to go to the zoo. And we call this the lost generation. And then they don't come back until they're parents and they have kids, right? And then they'll come again for 10 years until their kids grow up and then they're gone again.
Wow.
So when you mention whether it's a generational issue, I think it is this love relationship that goes like that.
Right.
There are periods of your life
Yes.
when the zoo is like you'll be spending every weekend there,
Yeah.
or we hope you'll be spending every weekend there.
Yeah.
There are periods of your life where it's maybe less relevant, and we hope to change that. We hope to evolve Mandai Wildlife Reserve into a place where, as you grow up, as you grow old, that it is a place that you will continue to come repeatedly, either by yourself, with your friends, with your family, with your colleagues. And I think that's part of the transformation that Mandai is undertaking.
So you mentioned some of these innovations that you're working on. I'd love to deep dive a little bit more in that. You know, what are these innovations and how are they kind of transforming the environment around us?
Yeah, so at Mandai, we embrace the triple bottom line, as we call it, performance, people, planet. So performance is where, obviously we are an entity that delivers immersive wildlife experiences to our visitors and our guests. So under performance, we take a lot of effort in innovation in terms of delivering those experiences. Under the people pillar is where our people, right, our staff, and employees, and where we are trying to nurture all of them to be innovators, right? And then the third one, planet, making sure that we embrace cutting-edge technology in terms of looking after our animals, the animals under our care, as well as the animals out in the wild. So that's conservation. So, reflecting on how this innovation might impact the environment, maybe I'll start with the planet and then I'll move to the gas. So in terms of the environment, I think one of the key things that we are very mindful of is that we have 15,000 animals under our care.
Oh, wow, I didn't know that.
Yeah. 1,000 species and 15,000 animals.
Wow.
So it is a highly labor-intensive undertaking to take care of them. And our innovation has been around introducing cutting-edge ways to provide that world-class animal care. So for example, if you have not been to our latest offering, the Bird Paradise, I warmly welcome you to join us there. We've got 8 large walk-in aviaries, largest in the world. And making sure that the aviary mesh is intact, integrity is sound, no accidental tears and all that. In the past would require our staff to climb up and to go and observe it manually. But now we are putting in place smart technology that will allow us to preempt any stresses in the mesh and to be able to alert and detect us. So, it also impacts employee safety. So we don't have our people having to climb up the heights. But also, we are able to leverage artificial intelligence, right, in terms of processing the data and to be able to give predictive outcomes. So that's just one example of how our innovation improves, right, the environment that our animals live in.
Fantastic.
So that's great, the way you're impacting, innovating for the people. And what are you doing to improve the performance of the organization as such?
So for performance, I think we spend a lot of time thinking about how we can inspire people to value and conserve biodiversity. So, the challenge that I always give myself and to my team is of the 5 million visitors that used to visit us pre-COVID, right? does every one of them leave wanting to do their part for wildlife?
Yes.
And as Sir David Attenborough rightly said, no one will protect what they do not love. Right. And so our innovation challenge is, how do I spark that love and help people fall in love with wildlife at scale, right? Such that every single visitor leaves with wanting to change their behavior and wanting to do their part with wildlife. So one of the innovations that we have experimented with that has been successful is a program called My Animal Buddy, where we allow children to befriend one of the animals in our zoo. So instead of, I'm just going to the zoo to visit and look at animals, it becomes, I'm going to the zoo to visit Pedro, my sea lion friend, right? Or Rudy, my rabbit friend, right? Or Kanza, my orangutan friend. And the children are able to stay connected with their buddies through videos, through live cams, through virtual shows and the likes. And we've been able to very thankfully nurture a group of children who passionately love their animal buddies and want to do their part to protect their friends in the wild.
Fascinating. So the final P you talked about was planet, I believe, right? So what do you think has a bigger impact on the kind of impact that you can have on the planet? Would this be technological innovations or really human behavior that you need to affect to achieve that outcomes for the planet?
I feel that it's probably a bit of both. Like, we need technology to provide the data and the insights to people. And we are also experimenting with using technology to nudge people to have behavioral changes. So if you think about how successful, I'm going to call it behavioral hacks have been, digital and social media platforms have deployed them very successfully, right? Can those same hacks be actually deployed to change human behavior towards saving the planet, for example, right? So I think that in the world, we've seen a lot of very successful behavioral nudges, but probably not enough, right, in terms of changing behavior to protect our planet.
One thing I wanted to ask you, I hope it's okay to ask. I think what we mean by biodiversity, I think it's quite a hard concept for people. So do you have a sort of simple way of talking about kind of what it means? What's biodiversity?
Yeah, so the simple way, when I explain to my children
Sounds like me, yes.
what I do for a living, I just break it down to flora and fauna.
Okay,
Yeah,
I understand.
it's just all the living things around us that are not human.
Yes.
It's the physical environment that is not man-made, right? So everything that we have been gifted as humanity, right, but not humans, right? So it's the water, it's the air, it's the... So I know that biodiversity can be a big word,
Yes.
but I break it down to basically, all nature and all living organisms in this world, right, that coexist. Right? Of course, humans are a species that is very important as well.
Yeah. And you said this idea of falling in love with wildlife. I mean, I think it's such an important idea, isn't it? But another question I want to ask you was about how do you think you can get the business community to kind of get more involved in the importance of these areas and the importance, I think, of falling in love with wildlife as well?
I think that there has been a little bit of a tipping point over the past few years. In the past, climate change was just a statistic, a picture, an article you read in the newspaper, a video. But I think over the last few years, extreme climate changes have really impacted human beings. Whether it's the extreme heat, or the extreme cold, or the storms that we've never seen of a great intensity, right? And I think over the past week, the hottest week ever in the history of humanity, right? Over the last few 100,000 years. So I think that finally, the impact is being felt. Humans are suffering the impact. Businesses are suffering the impact. And therefore, I think that there is this greater appreciation of the need to do something about it. I think we are still finding our way globally as a, us as an entire species, right? Because today there is still a perceived trade-off for what is more sustainable, I'm going to call it, whether it's increased inconvenience, right? So when I was growing up, we used to bring the tingkat and we would go buy food, bring it home. Nowadays, tingkat is, out of fashion, right? Because it's so convenient to just go to a shop, get a takeaway, disposable box. So to go back to more sustainable behaviors requires a trade-off.
Yes.
Inconvenience.
Yes.
Right? And as human beings, we are designed to optimize. Anything that has more inconvenience, more cost, right? Loss of value will inherently be ruled out from our decision making.
Yeah.
So the innovation that I think that is sorely needed is to find solutions that do not require human beings to have that trade-off. Right? How do you facilitate a takeaway behavior that does not need somebody to, I am going out, I'm not sure whether I'm going to buy something home, I'm going to bring a Tupperware, right? Or a takeaway box with me, right? How do you overcome that? So I think it's just a beautiful territory of innovation, right? To be able to achieve that sustainable behavior without triggering the trade-offs of cost, of convenience, and value. Yeah.
It's a hard nut to crack, I'd say.
Yeah. Opportunity for innovation, though,
Absolutely.
isn't it? Really? Yeah,
Absolutely.
Yeah. Very interesting. Yeah, very interesting.
So, Belina, you mentioned, the kind of resistance that people face, and nobody wants to do something if it's inconvenient. So, what are some of the kind of frameworks or models that Mandai uses to kind of affect behavior and change within the community?
Yeah, so we use this behavioral change model called EDCA. It's an acronym that stands for A for awareness, D for desire, K for knowledge, A for actionability, and R for repeatability. And in our wildlife parks, we are very effective in the first three domains of change, right? Because with the wildlife experiences, we are able to trigger that awareness and desire for change of behavior. So for example, it's very difficult for a child or a person to understand the impact of plastic pollution or microplastic pollution, right? But when you show them a picture of a tortoise, right, with a straw, plastic straw stuck in the nose, or the fishes and the dolphins completely entangled in plastic waste, it comes alive, right? And people feel that, oh my God, like my actions really have an impact. Then after that is the knowledge to change, like what can they do in their daily lives to make a difference? So in the Mandai Wildlife Parks, we have been fairly successful in triggering those three domains of change. The challenge comes in the fourth domain of actionability.
Right.
Because a typical mother with kids, if she's a working mother, she goes home, she has to feed the child, bathe the child, put the child to bed, take out her laptop, complete her work, and all notions of saving wildlife would be
Out the
gone
window.
because life takes over, right?
Yes.
So there is a lot of friction points, a lot of impediments to taking action. So in Mandai, we are starting a corporate venture and going into corporate venture building to precisely innovate in this area of actionability so that we can address exactly what you mentioned, the inconvenience, the value, the cost considerations, the discomfort, right, that comes about with behavioral change and make it easier for everyone.
That's a big plan. That sounds like a lot of ambition, and that's going to be a long journey as well, I can imagine.
Yeah.
And I guess just winding the clock back a little bit, what sort of impact did COVID have? I know it's a dumb question, but what sort of impact did COVID have on Mandai?
So one of the things that we had this little phrase, right, that we said we want you to fall in love in park with the animals and wildlife and have a long distance relationship out of park. Because that's where you continue to back to the quote, right? You don't protect what you don't love. So we don't believe that one spark in the park would suffice. So we had already been experimenting with how would we, sustain that long distance relationship out of park. So when COVID happened, it actually accelerated our efforts because people could no longer come, but they could still have that long distance relationship. So there were various ways. I mentioned my animal buddy that was accelerated as a result of COVID. And we had other means of engaging. So using, like, for example, social media, live streams was a very, very important way that we keep in touch with people who really missed our parks.
Fair enough. Yep, that makes sense. I guess we're sort of coming towards the end of the discussion. And one of the things that we always ask our guests is there any, it's difficult to do, but any kind of core thought that you want to leave our viewers and listeners with in terms of this concept of conservation, sustainability, this idea of falling in love with wildlife?
I would say that all my years with Mandai has led me to realize that we need a different definition of a better choice. Very often when we say a better choice, it's only better for me, right? Or better for my family, right? It's very, very small, immediate circle. And I think that's one of the reasons why the world is in the way it is, right? Because when you define better as only for yourself and your family, that we would not consider other people. So that's the social sustainability angle. We wouldn't consider the environment, right, or nature. That's the environmental sustainability angle, right? Because we're only looking at ourselves. So I feel that one of the ways innovation can make a difference is to make this choice a better one, right? Not just for yourself, but for others and for the world at the same time. And then by then we would have removed the friction point for people to change. We have made the world a better place at the same time. And I hope in 20 years' time, we'll still be enjoying not more than 35-degree weather in Singapore. And everyone would be thriving together with nature.
Fantastic. That's a really, really good thought to kind of leave us with.
Before that, I just want to interject and come back to the COVID question again.
Yes.
I love what you guys have done with, the animal buddy and all of this. But how does it affect the performance aspect of the business, given that, you can't collect money at the till when people don't visit the park? And how's the business kind of adapted to that as well?
So what we did was, of course, it was difficult. People would not be physically visiting. So we had various programs that allowed people who supported the parks to contribute to us financially. So this took the form of, for example, micro donations or micro sponsorships. Right? Our animals were up for adoption. So if you really love the animal, you could adopt the animal, and then you could almost remotely interact or engage with the animal that you had adopted. So there were these ways that we, were able to still have some form of revenue stream. It didn't offset, of course, not operating the parks, but there were ways to still be able to engage and to build new revenue streams for the company.
Cool.
Fantastic.
Yeah. Go ahead, Richard.
What's your
My key takeaway, I think that last point that Belina mentioned is really important. I think a lot of businesses have struggled with kind of, keeping the lights on, or rather, keeping with the as-is business, and then kind of transforming the business at the same time and kind of make it commercially viable while still sustaining the original business. And, it's not easy to kind of build a commercial model on top of all of these innovations. So I think that's fascinating what you guys have done, and I wish you all the luck in moving forward with that as well.
Yeah. I think, because I'm the people person. So I love this concept of falling in love with wildlife. It's such a big idea, actually, and increasingly as people live in such urban worlds and urban environments, the thing that's missing from their lives and the power that wildlife can bring to their lives is such a powerful thought. So that's what I'm going to be taking away from today. That brings us to the end of the episode. Thank you so much for your time today. Belina, it was a wonderful chat. Thank you to our viewers and listeners for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you again soon on another episode of the TransformAsians podcast.
And don't forget to like and subscribe. Thank you.